Through the tight canyon of Lanberis Pass, the wind howled and banged like a living thing into the side of Dr. Asha Malik's pickup. The road became a nightmare of shifting shadows as the thick, turbulent snow whirled in the headlights. Her knuckles whitening against the black leather, she gripped the steering wheel tighter. A hiker descending too late from Crib Gork had observed a dark shape in the snow, according to the jumbled mountain rescue call. That might mean anything in a blizzard at 2 in the morning. A sheep that has been killed. A pony that has gone missing. A dead body. But as the radio crackled, something in her stomach wrenched. She struggled up the snowy slope, her breath fogging the inside of the windshield. Not only was Asha a veterinarian. Not this evening. Once more, she was a witness. A lady torn between the present and a memory from 3 years ago that tore at the very edge of her awareness. The night she lost Orion, her stallion, in an inexplicable barn fire. The sound of hooves hitting wood as flames raced up the rafters, the heat, the smoke. She pulled herself back into the present with a forceful blink. The road was engulfed by snowdrifts. She applied a light stop, brought the vehicle to a crawl, and then turned on the high beams. Then the white blazed across the stone wall to her right. There, half covered in snow, a form sagged against the slope, just discernible beyond the dry stone wall. Asha killed the engine, put the truck in park, and ventured out into the storm. She was pushed sideways by the wind. As she clambered over the wall, ice shattered beneath her feet. The animal was a horse. Not just a horse, though. A mare. Half buried in drifting snow, she lay on her side with her breath shallow and her eyes wide and glossy. The small layer of frost glistened on her mottled grey coat. Asha could feel the tension the instant she touched her neck, shaky, tense, as though the mare had struggled against something much more formidable than the storm. She then noticed the marks. The throat in a rough line. Clean, chafed, too accurate for a genuine wound. A burn of rope. A noose? As Asha combed through the mare's matted mane, her hand shook. Nylon in red? Slice cleanly. Her stomach fell. This was more than just a wounded animal. They had hunted this mare. The mare was startled into action by an abrupt, frenetic movement beneath her belly. Expecting a child. The breathing was irregular, contractions. The belly was enlarged. Early labor. Or simply shock. She said, barely heard above the wind, "Stay with me." Her fingers fumbled in the cold as she groped for her phone. One signal bar. Enough? She sent the rescue group thread a single text message that read. The horse was located. Expecting a child. Rope markings. Near the mile 7 sign, an urgent evacuation is required. She then lowered herself to her knees next to the mare, removing her coat and covering the animal's bare flank with it. Her own breath came quickly now, but it was due to something far older, panic, remorse, or memory, rather than the cold. The fire had returned. In her head. The same powerlessness. The same heart that thuds. She might still be able to preserve something this time, though. She pressed her ear to the mare's abdomen as she leaned in closer. A leisurely cadence. Stable yet weak. The heartbeat of a foal. The mare suddenly raised her head and fixed her gaze on her. Not out of fear. I'm not confused. But in a way that was dreadfully similar to begging. Asha stopped. She recognized that expression. Once, before the smoke had stolen him, Orion had handed it to her. Do something, it said. The wind changed. And Asha heard something strange coming through it, from farther down the slope. The clinking of metal. A faint whir of tires churning in the slush. Squinting through the storm, she turned. Just black and white. However, someone had been present. She looked around the floor. Deep, wide, irregular tracks stretched up toward the edge of the trees. A trailer. Just parked. An vintage 4x4 perhaps. Something larger, perhaps. In a storm, why would someone carry a pregnant mare this far out and then abandon her? Except if they didn't intend for her to live. Asha felt nauseous. The nylon was cut. The burn on the neck. The foal within. She grabbed the emergency blanket from her satchel while gritting her teeth. Despite her cold stiffened fingers, she was able to slide it under the mare's chest and wrap it gently over her shoulders. One more text. To Lady Imogen Arundel, this time. Brynderwen wasn't far away, the Viscountess was the only one who could provide refuge at this hour. She was as regal as she was stubborn. An emergency situation. Mare who is pregnant. Isolation stall is now required. Possibly targeted. No response? However, Imogen had a reputation for holding her tongue. Asha's headlamp flickered as she massaged the mare's ears, catching something partially buried in the snow next to the rear leg. A tag made of metal. She extracted it. The lettering was still visible despite the ice-frozen and mud-caked surface. VBS 2. Her breath caught. It was no ordinary tag. Vale Bloodstock Stud was that person. 2 also indicated that this mare was descended from a subsidiary line. A display horse, no. A breeder. This implied that the person who dumped her didn't want to take the chance of taking her somewhere else. Her proximity to foaling was too close. Too brittle. A drawback. She became a loose end as a result. Asha's heartbeat accelerated. The name of Sir Bennett Vale had repeatedly come up in veterinary forums and rescue organizations' whisper networks. Stories of lost horses, missing mares, and untraceable auctions kept coming up despite the charity front and impeccable reputation. In the distance, she heard a whistle and looked up. Not the wind. Not a beast. Human? She instinctively ducked, protecting the mare with her body as she looked over the ridgeline. Not a move. However, there was a viewer. She had been observed by someone locating the horse. The foal gave a kick. The mare gave a start. Asha didn't hold out. A red flame was thrown into the storm as she retrieved the emergency flare from her coat pocket and slammed it against the stone wall. A marker. A caution. And if there was anybody out there with malicious intent. There was a message. Not this evening. The snow continued to fall. Asha's truck's hood was covered in thick ridges of frost from the wind by the time she arrived at Brynderwen's wrought iron gates. Her breath was shallow, and her knuckles were raw from holding the wheel. Behind her, in the insulated trailer, the mare lay drugged, still twitching but still alive, blanketed. She felt motivated to move forward just by the foal's steady, sluggish heartbeat. With its ancient oak trees bowing beneath the weight of ice, the estate loomed ahead, covered in fog and pouring snow. The lights of the vast house flickered on. She knew Lady Imogen too well, but she hadn't received a text back. Never was silence denial. Being silent means getting ready. The West Wing's side door opened as Asha swung around the round gravel driveway. With 2 steady hands already sliding a broad metal ramp in the direction of the trailer, a tall person wearing a dark wool cloak emerged. As Asha opened her door, Lady Imogen Arundel nodded and lifted one hand without saying anything. In this manner, she stated coolly, her voice clear against the breeze. I asked them to bring fresh straw and clean the isolation stall. If she survives the night, there is enough room for her to foal securely, as well as heat and light. Asha remarked, almost defiantly, she'll make it. All right. So let's avoid wasting time. They did their work fast. The mare was sleepy but receptive, and Asha had begun to call her Skylark in her mind, light, grey, and skyborn. Her ears perked up the instant the ramp hit the trailer floor. As they gently encouraged Skylark to come out, Asha crawled in and put her palm on her withers. For a smooth transition, the snow had halted just long enough. By the time they arrived at the converted foaling stall in the south barn, Skylark had started to raise her head once more, her eyes flickering and her nostrils flaring as though she was looking around for something she had misplaced. Or someone? As Asha checked the saline infusion and carefully adjusted the fourth line, she whispered, "She keeps looking east." In the direction of the Carneddau range. Standing just beyond the gate, Imogen remarked softly, "She remembers where she came from." They always do. The stall, built with thick wood boards and dense straw, was warm. It was protected from the cold by old stone walls. A gentle infrared warmer hummed to life above. With a deep moan in her throat, Skylark shifted her weight and lay down once again. Asha knelt next to her and used her stethoscope to locate the foal by tracing its belly. There was a slight rhythm. She flattened her palm on the mare's flesh. "Please." There was a squeak in the door. Another person came in, wiping the snow off her shoulders. Tall and weathered, with wind-chapped cheekbones and eyes like tarnished silver, Eleri Hughes nodded briefly before crouching next to Asha. "She's ours," Eleri stated plainly. Asha looked up. "Carneddau." Eleri gave a nod. "Certainly. That physique, high head carriage, short back, and muscular haunches. However, she has been dealt with. Someone made a terrible attempt to halt or break her. She is expecting a child. Due soon. I see it. Did she not flee from you?" "No. She gave me the impression that she had been waiting." For a beat, they sat in silence, interrupted only by the mare's slow, strained breathing and the steady clink of the fourth bag swinging softly on its hook. Something tangled in the rough hair of the mare's mane as Asha shifted to reposition her foreleg. A piercing flash of metal, partially obscured by tangled hair. She released it gradually. It was a metal tag, tiny and rusty. Laser engraved. VBS 2. Imogen moved in closer. She squinted. She nearly spat out the words, "Vale Bloodstock Stud." Study 2. This would be one of his satellite businesses, perhaps the holding pens, not the main estate. "Are you certain?" Asha inquired. "I've previously seen these tags. During my brief employment with the Animal Welfare Board. Even then, Bennett Vale denied everything. However, the pattern is consistently the same: disappearances, hard treatment, and pregnant mares." Eleri's mouth tightened. "Ponies have been going missing. Young mares and fillies. We reasoned that tourists might be strays who were hit or picked up on the roadways. However, this is intentional." Asha took the tag out of her purse and placed it in a specimen bag. "It must be reported." "You will," said Imogen. "But not just yet. Not with this alone. For the law to take notice, we need more than just a hunch and a hunchbacked pony." Skylark had started to quiver in her sleep, so Asha turned back to her. Her nose flared once more toward the east, toward the open air, and her ears flicked. Part call, part moan, a deep, guttural sound emerged in her throat. Eleri whispered, "She's trying to tell us something. There are more of them in the world." Asha gave a slow nod. "She wants us to track them down." After that, they worked in silence. In order to stabilize Skylark's contractions, Asha gave her an anti-inflammatory medication. The foal was almost ready, But not quite. Perhaps hours. If they were lucky, a day. If it wasn't absolutely necessary, she didn't want to induce. Skylark was still asleep at dawn, breathing steadily. Asha's mind was too busy to notice that her hands were red and blistered from the cold. Imogen had a mug of black tea in her gloved hands and was waiting at the manor house's back staircase when she left the stables. Without saying anything, she handed it over. Asha wrapped both hands over the mug and whispered, "She has a name now. Skylark." Imogen whispered, "Fitting," and then looked toward the horizon. "You'll require assistance. Someone with the ability to bypass red tape and closed gates." Asha's eyebrow went up. Imogen went on, "And someone with a memory like yours. I still remember what they did to Orion." Asha winced. "I can't let this one go as well." "You won't?" Then Eleri came out of the darkness with a folded map in her hand. "Up, past Penagurid is a quarry. Left behind. It is used for parties by local children. There, we discovered deep hoofprints last year. No horses, though. No indications." With narrowed eyes, Asha remarked, "Maybe a holding site. They might bring the rest there." Once more, a chill wind swept from the peaks. The snow had subsided, but the dawn light revealed something more sinister. Skylark was theirs. They had a clue now. And whoever was responsible for this had erred by abandoning one survivor. DS Cerys Vaughan disliked being called at 5:37 a.m., particularly when it had nothing to do with horses. With her boots still covered in slush and her hands encircling a bitter paper cup of coffee that had been machine brewed, she stood just inside the Carnarvon police station. Overnight, the storm brought down 12 power lines and caused 4 small-scale traffic accidents throughout the area. The message arrived before she had even unzipped her coat. A pregnant mare with a VBS tag and rope burns was discovered. Suspected poaching. Dr. Asha Malik is a witness. Cerys let out a moan. Out of everyone. She didn't directly detest Asha, rather, she had a peculiar admiration for the woman. However, Asha's intuition had a way of exposing Cerys's cozy procedural bounds. Hunches. Instincts. Crusades driven by trauma. Even worse, she was typically correct. Cerys knew when to move, though. She was standing with her arms crossed in the renovated isolation barn at Bryn Derwen by 7:15, while Asha gave her a briefing under the cozy glow of the infrared lighting. Behind them, Skylark slept soundly, her breathing steady and deep, her eyes partly closed. Overnight, the foal had moved lower, shortly. Cerys gazed at the evidence bag's silver tag. VBS 2. What precisely is that? Bloodstock stud, Vale? Stud number 2, Asha stated in a quiet, controlled tone. I've already seen their mares in rehabilitation centers. Typically with more severe wounds than this. Undernourished. Overbred. Cerys scowled. I assumed that these days, Sir Bennett Vale was all charity auctions and tartan vests. He is. On paper. Do you also believe that he is poaching wild ponies? I believe there is someone in his operation. When the foaling risk became too great, Skylark was probably removed from the Carneddau range, forced into transportation, and eventually dumped. Cerys took a step toward the mare and observed the rise and fall of her flank. The way the animal regarded her was unnerving, it was too silent, as though it knew exactly who to fear and who to trust. Finally, Cerys stated, I'll need more than a tag. A tablet with a CCTV still on it was given to her by Asha. This was taken from Lady Imogen's personal security archive. The last night. At 2:57 a.m., this truck drove by her estate gate. No plates. Wrapped with tarpaulin. Cerys's eyes narrowed. Create and model. Ancient livestock carrier. Probably a repurposed horse box. There is a noticeable mudguard tier on the right wheel. How did you? Because 4 hours later I chased the same one out of Llanberis Pass. Cerys was drawn to that. You went with them? No. When they knew someone had located Skylark, they ran away. Cerys rubbed the back of her neck and moaned. Though not quickly enough to construct a case, the pieces were starting to fit together. The tag. The place. An image of a hauler in the snow, blurry. It didn't all directly point to Vale. As you are aware, I am unable to present this to the Chief Inspector just yet. He will request concrete proof, such as witness confirmation, registration papers, and the chain of custody. I'm giving it my all for you. And, Malik, it's good. Do not misunderstand me. However, raiding a stud owned by one of Wales' wealthiest men is insufficient. I'm not requesting a raid. However. Cerys's eyebrows arched. What are you requesting, then? Asha stared. Time. And assist in tracking down the logistics, the way he transports them. Where they go. Who is the signatory to the documents? With a groan, Cerys took out her phone. I'll quietly review the list of subsidiaries of Vale Holdings. I'll find a paper trail if there is one. But this time, you'll keep me updated. I'll. Cerys paused as she turned to go. She then turned to face Asha, who was applying ointment to Skylark's injured neck. You've been burned before, Cerys said. This is personal because of that. Asha took a while to respond. She said, she was everything I had left. And I couldn't save her in time. Cerys gave one nod. Let's not pass up the next opportunity. Asha went back to her Conwy clinic later that afternoon to review her backup notes. She was going through previous field logs when she received a notification from her encrypted email about a file that Cerys had forwarded to her. Subject, Subsidiary number 14 of Vale Holdings. A series of payments from an Anglesey-registered shell business were described in the attached document. There was a familiar name on the directors' list, Kyle Stroud. Asha's blood froze. She had previously seen that name, in historical accounts of the fox hunting organizations Imogen had previously opposed. A handler? A person who fixes things. A man who had previously been charged with trespassing but had never been found guilty. 3 years prior, Kyle had vanished from the public record. He was back now, at least officially, and might perhaps be employed by Sir Bennett. Asha gave the screen a tap. It was an invoice for petrol reimbursement from a distant service station close to Llanberis, time-stamped 2:41 AM on the same evening when Skylark was discovered. It was starting to line up. And yet... Leaning back, Asha gazed out her window at the snow-capped hills. Bennett himself was still not directly connected. Kyle might assert that his operations are autonomous. It's possible the hauler isn't registered. One could claim that the tag was lost or stolen. Something more powerful was required. Someone who had been inside and saw what was taking place. Or another survivor. Her phone chimed at that moment. Hughes, Eleri. Asha. Eleri's voice was tense as she replied, I found something. Tracks. Several hooves. One set has new drag marks. As if they were being dragged. Close to the former slate quarry. Asha got to her feet. I'm en route. Her thoughts were already racing when she reached for her coat. There were walls in the legislation. Red tape. Prerequisites. The mountains, however, spoke the truth. And she was going to pay attention tonight? The sky was scarred with the prospect of more snow, but the wind had slowed. The air inside Bryn Derwen's foaling stall was thick with sweat, heat, and something more primordial, tension. Skylark moved once more, her nostrils opening and her breath coming in sharp, irregular gasps. Her sides trembled. She rolled her eyes back. The time had come. With one gloved hand on the mare's flank and the other grabbing for her birthing gear, Asha knelt down. The foal had turned, and the contractions were now severe and closely spaced. With a tense voice, Asha muttered, "It's coming. She's carrying it out." Steady as a rock, Eleri stood beside her, giving her iodine and sterile towels. With her boots firmly planted in the straw and her lips pushed into a narrow line, Imogen lingered at the gate. She was ready, elbow deep in hay and horse blood, even with the wealth, title, and silver ring on her finger. Then there was a glimmer of power. There was a stutter in the heater. There were two dips in the lights. Asha stopped. The storm isn't that. She made a sudden pivot to face the wall. Then she smelled it, just behind the stall's ammonia and stink. Gasoline? No. Heart thumping, she leapt to her feet and looked around the little window slit above the gate. Just black. Pushing the door open, she walked across the stall and into the hallway. And there was a silhouette down at the far end of the barn. A man. Put on your hood. Hunched shoulders. One hand holds a red fuel canister. In the other, something metal. He had yet to see her. With her heart thumping so hard that it almost deafened her, Asha took a rapid step back. She hurried back into the stall after grabbing the first object in her grasp, a fire extinguisher that was fastened to the door of the stable. She yelled at Eleri, "The back gate must be locked. Now." "What is it?" "Petrol. He is coming to set her on fire. Burn us all." Imogen made a snap decision. A high-pitched siren roared across the yard as she got out her phone and pressed the emergency security protocol. The man winced, then ran. Asha leapt out of the stall and ran into the night after him. Like a slap, the cold struck her. As he vaulted the side gate, his boots skidding in the frost, she came around the corner. He glanced back and his hood briefly slipped. Only a moment. But enough. Asha looked into his face. Lines that are deep. Crooked nose. A scar on the jaw. His eyes were as pale and untamed as an animal in a corner. She felt a stab of recognition. Stroud, Kyle? The man from the dossier of Cerys. The enforcer of the fox hunt became a ghost. Beyond the paddock, he vanished into the trees. Asha didn't comply. Her heart was still pounding from the chase and the sheer rage that this guy had dared to come here, tonight, as she stood there trembling, extinguisher in hand. Skylark screamed within. Asha sprinted back. The mare was kicking on her side. Eleri was crouching close to her tail, her arms dripping wet. "She's taking the crown." Asha collapsed next to her, gasping for air. "All right. All right. Girl, stay with me." The circle of heat and light was all that was left of the world. Asha could hardly hear the alarm still wailing in the distance. She could just make out the little, slippery shape starting to take shape. A foreleg. Then another. A twitching nose. Skylark, easy. Push. A pause. Quiet. The foal got away. Still. Asha felt sick to her stomach. No, no, not in this manner. Her nostrils were cleansed. Gave the chest a rub. "Don't weep." She touched the small body with her ear. Nothing. Then, hardly perceptible. A tremor. A snag. A sigh. The foal spat and gasped once more before whinnying loudly. Asha's chest flooded with relief as she smiled through clenched teeth. She succeeded. Like her mother, the child was grey, with excessively long legs and a rising head. Together, they dried and stimulated the foal by wiping it down with a fresh towel that Eleri handed her. Imogen eventually let out a full breath and leaned in, placing her palm on the gate. For a minute, Asha held the foal's head in her arms. "Hello, little Pippet, welcome to the world." The name was unexpected, but it seemed appropriate, bold, tiny, a storm-born bird. Skylark raised her head behind them, her eyes gentle, tired, yet alert. She saw her kid. And refrained from panicking. Asha was permitted to remain. The second miracle was that. "She's embracing you," Eleri muttered. Very few wild ones would. After meeting her gaze, Asha turned back to the foal curled up against her coat. "I believe she is aware that I would burn the world before allowing someone to steal her once more." Cerys arrived later, her hair still wet from the rain, her eyes already scouting the area like a hawk, after the police had secured the property and started their hunt in the woods, after the vet techs had come, after the foal had nursed, and after Skylark had been stabilized. "Arson was attempted," she stated somberly. Asha said, "I saw him." "Kyle Stroud?" "He was present." Cerys winced. "Are you certain?" "Indeed. He was carrying a red fuel can. Most likely intended to destroy all of the evidence, including the mare and the tag." Cerys looked at the hurriedly rewired barn camera display. The internal feed of the stall played a blurry still after blinking briefly. There. The barely perceptible face of Kyle was caught in action. It was dark but nevertheless noticeable. Cerys gazed at the display. "That's him, okay. Formerly a hunter. Alleged enforcer. 3 Essex sealed records. He also works for Vale. I'm not ready to say that yet." "You'll?" Cerys remained silent. Her jaw, however, tensed. "We'll remove the video. Acquire facial recognition. I'll contact Bangor's unit." Silently. Asha turned back to Pippet and Skylark. She ran, which is why they are still alive. Since she was able to recall where to go. And you paid attention. I just hope it's sufficient. The snow outside started up again, slowly and softly, as if it had been reset. However, they were all aware of this. It wasn't over yet. It was only the start. The air was crisp and frigid the morning after Pippet's birth, as if every breath had been taken in a different century. The snow on the peaks glinted like glass, and for once the sky was clear, stretching taut over the ragged ridge of Carneddau Ponies. With Skylark and her baby safely inside, Asha stood at the edge of the pasture behind Bryn Derwen, but her gaze was fixed on the mountains. The sensation that something was still beckoning to her persisted. That Skylark had been fleeing something that night, not simply for her own life. Or in the direction of something abandoned. Eleri arrived in her Land Rover at that moment. She urged, "Bundle up," through the open window. "We're heading to the higher lands. I have something I would want to show you." With tires crunching through frozen slush and hairpin twists that sliced through old stone, they drove northeast into the heart of Eleri. For many generations, the small, rough, and almost untamed Carneddau horses grazed these slopes. They were not owned, but they were observed. Not broken, but counted. Asha was starting to see why Eleri referred to them as the unsurrendered. They got out of the truck an hour into the drive and walked on. The breeze cut their faces as Eleri guided her across a ridge dotted with boulders. As they ascended a short track toward an exposed slate shelf, Asha could feel her legs burning as mist rose from the valleys below. Eleri came to a standstill there. Eleri stated in a respectful tone, "This is where she came from. This ground is Carneddau." Through the crevices in the rock, the wind groaned softly, and sporadic prints, some trailing long tracks as if dragged, others half-hoofed and sharp, dotted the frozen dirt. Eleri knelt down and touched the earth, adding, "They were driven. Do you see the pattern? This sweep is clean, it pulls hard like a halter. Several groups of hooves grouped together. Pushed together. Herded." Asha was kneeling next to her. She ran her gloved palm over a tiny line and remarked, "And here, drag marks. They made a move." Eleri gave a nod. "Most likely, Skylark. A pregnant mare is difficult to move." She objected. They followed the route till it vanished over a tiny rise and over the shelf. A natural bowl, sheltered from the wind and away from the road, was situated on the opposite side, sandwiched between two slabs of old slate. The stone had a wide ring of trampled dirt and heavy scuff marks. As a meeting place, Eleri whispered. "Transient pen. Before being transported, they most likely gathered them here at night." Asha strolled around the edge. Red nylon rope shards entangled in a shrub. Chestnut and grey hair clung to a low fence post in scattered tufts. Half buried under the ice is a shattered water tub. This actually happened. Eleri called after her as she headed back toward the trail, following the ground downhill. "Where are you going? Tell me where they were taken next, please." There was no obvious road, but the earth had been disturbed, and the route descended sharply into the next valley. The frozen moss makes grooves. Flattened brush. Tire scuffs. They descended cautiously for 30 minutes till they came to a locked gate that was corroded with age, and then a quarry. Several ancient sheds slumped against the wall like broken teeth as Asha gazed at the ragged mouth of stone rising from the valley bottom. The interior of the mouth was black and reverberating. She sighed, "I had no idea this was here." "Quarry 3 is what the locals call it," Eleri stated. 20 years of abandonment. We believed it to be vacant." Slowly, Asha pushed the gate open. On its hinges, it shrieked. They entered. The silence came instantly. The sort of silence that didn't feel right. Footprints in the snow indicated that one of the old sheds, which were chained, had been disturbed recently. The sound of boot sole crunching. Asha also noticed a new heap of manure close to the edge of a corroded skip bin. Horse. The ammonia struck her immediately inside the shed. Sensitive. Bitter. It was as if too many creatures had remained in one spot for too long. Eleri's expression tightened. "This pen is for holding. Short term? Before relocating them, they keep them here. But where?" Asha muttered. Eleri remained silent. She was looking at a faded map with circles and arrows on it that was affixed to the inside of the shed door. Asha leaned closer. At Holyhead, one arrow pointed toward the port. However, another. She pointed to a small valley just south of here and said, "Here. An ancient poultry processing facility. Closed several years ago. That's in the next basin, right?" Indeed. It was formerly known as the Cold Hen. "Eleri, they're freezing the horses instead of taking them to market." The words had a bile tang to them. It wasn't merely carelessness. A system existed. Asha snapped pictures of the rope fibers, the hair, the stall conditions, and the map. Evidence could be found in every inch. Each print is an appeal for assistance. This was what Skylark had fled. Fought without charge? And it had given birth to Pippet. Asha remarked, "She guided us here." Slowly, Eleri nodded. The ponies of Carneddau never forget. Asha felt a change in her chest as they stood in the freezing wind, gazing at the still, dead quarry. It was anger, to be sure, but it was something more profound. A feeling of obligation. Not only to the foal born in the firelight or the mare who had survived, but to all the wild ones who were hushed and taken. They were more than only victims. They saw it happen. And she was now, too. The storm was over, but the true weather was just getting better in Lady Imogen Arundel's world. The scent of bergamot, aged wood polish, and barely contained tension-filled Bryn Derwen's drawing room. Leaded windows let in afternoon light, which created lengthy shadows on the old rug. Silver teaspoons clattered lightly against bone china cups while the fire crackled, unaltered since the morning. Without the three carefully selected guests currently sat on her Chesterfield sofas, two former racing magnates who are semi-retired but still influential in business circles, and a county councilman with a forgettable face and an easily manipulated conscience, it would have appeared to be just another noblewoman's tea. With her gloves off and her fingers interlaced in her lap, Imogen sat across from them. Charming was not her purpose. Not right now. With ease, she said, let's not waste time. I phoned you because our county is experiencing an extremely offensive and unlawful situation. And I think we can stop it from happening with your help. A leather folder was slid across the table by her. A printed still of Kyle Stroud's face from the CCTV camera is within. An image of the VBS2 tag that was removed from Skylark's hair. A map taken from the shed at the quarry. The cold hen plant as seen from space. Screenshots of the Vale Holdings related cargo logs. There was silence in the room. The white-haired elder man, a former steward of a famous stud farm, took up one of the pictures and narrowed his eyes. Bennett Vale cannot be here. He serves on the board of the British Equestrian Trust. Imogen leaned a little closer. Exactly. And you will all be removed by association if this is published while your names are still linked to his racing syndicate. So, you have two options. Keep him safe, or keep yourself safe. The man with the thick neck and the hands of a horse breeder cleared his throat. Do you have any witnesses? Indeed. A survivor, too. Skylark is a mare. I'm sure you'll see her in the papers soon enough. The councilman moved uneasily. You are aware that legitimate evidence and jurisdictional clearance are necessary for this type of investigation. We are unable to move just because. Imogen's tone was sharp, but it didn't raise. Mr. Councilman, we are not acting based on feelings. We are pursuing shell companies that were sent through Holyhead, veterinarian records that were fabricated, and false transit documents. Unless you want me to reveal your history of campaign donations the next time the media knocks on my door, all I ask is that you remain silent while the cops obtain the warrant. The quiet dragged on once more. The older man cleared his throat after that. He whispered, "Let her do it. This time, he has gone too far." Imogen gave a single nod and got up. She grabbed the cord by the fireplace and pulled hard. Down the corridor came the sound of a chime. Shortly after, a footman showed up with a silver tray that contained one iPad. "Send Detective Sergeant Vaughan everything," she instructed. "Make use of the safe channel." She then turned to her guests, who appeared much less at ease in their regal chairs. "I advise you to get your public remarks ready. Because, I promise you, nobody will be able to claim ignorance once this makes the headlines." DS Cerys Vaughan watched the files come in at the North Wales Rural Crime Team's fluorescent-lit office across the county. The pictures from the satellite. The CCTV remains motionless. The hauler's timestamp matched port records in the revised transport logs. Then, it was there. It was a paper-thin cover, but it would do for 12 horses designated as agricultural livestock, poultry substitutes on an export manifest. Her heart thumping, she took a sharp breath. It was this. She made a call to her boss in Bangor. "Sir, we have a search warrant because of attempted arson, obstruction, and industrial fraud under animal welfare violations." Her boss requested a synopsis. She delivered it succinctly. She waited after that. 62 seconds. The warrant came in PDF format. In the top corner, the magistrate's stamp shone red. Signed. Accepted. After a moment of staring at the TV, Cerys rose up slowly, a rare smile appearing on her face. She let out a breath. "They are with us." Unaware that the wheels had already turned, Asha went back to Bryn Derwen at dusk to see how Skylark and Pippet were doing. Wearing her warmest wool coat, Imogen met her in the hallway beside the stable doors, her eyes icy than the mountain air. "Dr. Malik, you might want to pack your bag," she suggested. "Why?" "Because we're going to raid a warehouse full of secrets tomorrow morning, and I suspect we'll need every set of hands we can find." Asha blinked. "You have the warrant." Imogen gave a small smile. Cerys did. "However, I ensured that the doors were open." In the ensuing silence, Asha's mind wandered to Cadda, the herd stallion. Still not found. The ledger still shows hold. "Perhaps the others can still escape if Skylark did," she muttered. "Then let's ensure that they do." Asha sat at Skylark's stall that night before going to bed. With its legs twitching in slumber, the foal was cuddled up against her side, breathing slowly. Without stress or fear, the mare gave her a single blink before lowering her head again. The wind had increased once more outside. However, it wasn't a warning this time. It was a pledge. The Cold Hen, an abandoned poultry processing plant transformed into a makeshift castle of secrets, crouched in the valley like a forgotten scar. The building stood gloomy against the night, its windows blacked out, its walls worn from decades of neglect, surrounded by broken fencing and frostbitten fields. It wasn't empty, though. With her heart thumping against her ribs, Asha stood beneath a pine windbreak. Flashlights flickered on in synchronized bursts all around her. The front-loading dock, the side gate, and the rear freight bay, which had formerly held crates of chickens but was now used for something much worse, were the locations of 3 tactical teams. She turned to her left. With his earpiece in place and his breath obscuring the air, DS Cerys Vaughan stood motionless as stone. She spoke in precise, concise commands over the radio. "Go, 3, 2, 1, on my mark." The breach team worked quickly. Rusted locks were cut with bolt cutters. With a moan, the main doors opened, revealing a corridor filled with decay and ammonia. Urine, dread, dirty fur, and something that shouldn't have been there were all mixed together to create a wave-like stench. Asha moved in, tightening her mask. The dull, yellow, buzzing lights continued to flicker. Then she caught sight of them. Dozens of horses were lined up in improvised kennels made out of collapsed chicken cages and old freezer units. Their bodies were slender, with ribs poking through skin and coats covered with filth. Weakly, a few raised their heads. Some remained still. Then she heard it, a hollow, low whinny coming from the far end. Another voice echoed Skylark's. She muttered, "Cadda." However, he wasn't present. The group dispersed across the building. Cerys led the way into the middle hallway, inspecting every room. After brushing near an old clipboard, her gloved hand froze. She yelled, "Shedlog." The handwriting corresponds to Warehouse 4. Initials are the same, K's. Stroud, Kyle? They continued to move. They discovered a decaying ledger with water-stained but readable pages in a shuttered side office. Names, dates of shipment, and currencies. Dozens of code-marked entries. VBS 2 and VBS 3. Several shipments. Some were marked cleared, while others had just the words hold, fresh, and breeder. Cerys fixed his jaw on it. This is a business model, not just an illicit trade. Asha made her way to the last line of pens, past the office. At the final stall, she stopped. A young gelding with a chestnut coat leaned into the bars, his eyes glassy and his head drooping. She sank to one knee without thinking and gently put her forehead to his. He didn't recoil. There was a sound, a low grunt, behind her. She pivoted. Another horse walked closer and leaned his head against the bars. He was older, slender, and had a coat like smoke and eyes that met hers with a spooky knowledge. Not Cadda. But not far. He put his muzzle to her chest. He pounded his heart against hers, and she felt it. And then, urgent, another sound. A whinny from outside, sharp. Skylark. No. No, Skylark? Beyond the floodlight, she saw a shadow standing motionless, and positioned in front of the open rear door. A pipit. They had been followed by the foal. Just behind, Skylark stood with her neck up, her ears perked up, and her hooves shaking, but she didn't run away. The mare's gaze shifted from Asha to the other animals. One ear flicked toward the sound as the stallion, weak yet commanding, raised his head. Asha moved out of the way. Skylark entered. The other horses started to stir. They turned their heads, one by one. Little motions. The tails lift. The shoulders twitch. Like electricity, a sound swept through them, recognition. She is their lighthouse, Asha exhaled. Cerys went to her side. A rescue crew is on their way. We'll remove them. How many trucks are there? 3. 1 is hot. 2 are improvised. Not enough? No, Cerys acknowledged. Better than abandoning them here, though. It was a cruel and slow extraction. Blankets? Sedatives. On gurneys, heat lamps are brought in. Imogen's call list attracted local volunteers, including off-duty veterinarians, stable hands and riders. Within an hour, the former cold hen was transformed into a triage facility. Still, no Cadda. When one of the volunteers called Asha over, she was standing close to the supply containers. We discovered something. There was a narrow crate, sealed with chain, far back, behind a row of abandoned refrigerators. An old mildewed ledger soaked from one corner of the room. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through it. Close near the bottom, hardly readable. Hold Cadda at Quarry 3. Her blood froze. She said, he's not here. They're still holding him. The herd was divided. Cerys's expression clouded. You and Eleri saw signs at that quarry. The location was a drop point. However, they relocated a few of them. Kept other people. Why split up Cadda? Because he is in charge, Asha remarked. Breaking the head breaks the herd. Cerys didn't think twice. At dawn, we raid the quarry. During their conversation, the name of Sir Bennett Vale was heard over the radio. He wasn't present. Kyle was nowhere to be seen either. However, 15 minutes prior to the raid, a black Bentley was seen departing a holding property. Heading north. Most likely to Anglesey. Toward a boat, most likely. The warning came from Cerys. The cold hen was under police control by dawn. They counted 47 horses. 4 required surgery right away. A pair were too feeble to move. However, the majority got to their feet. The majority lived. And Cadda, the one who hadn't, waited someplace in a secret area in North Wales. Or didn't. Asha, however, did not accept that. Outside the building, she watched Pipit nuzzle Skylark's flank while ice formed on her lashes. Clumsy and fearless, the foal squeaked. "We bring him home tomorrow," she remarked out loud. Narrow, high, and dangerous even on a good day, the road that cut through the A5 wound like a scar down the valley's edge. But this morning, a thin layer of black ice shimmered over the asphalt. The peaks of Eleri were bathed in a drab amber light as the sun had just started to rise. With emergency medical supplies and one last field kit in the back, Asha's Land Rover buzzed steadily uphill. Cerys had proceeded with Quarry 3's warrant. Eleri had gone back to the Cold Hen to manage the logistics of transportation. Additionally, Asha had insisted on bringing one final set of tools personally in spite of all the objections. She didn't make it. She noticed the flash of chrome in the rearview mirror halfway up the slope. A Bentley in black. Arriving quickly. She stiffened. There was no shoulder on the road. There is nowhere to pull off. For miles, there is no passing lane. The Bentley, however, did not slow down. Rather, it charged ahead, almost kissing her bumper with its grille. Asha gripped the wheel more tightly. Twice she tapped the brake. A caution. The impact followed. With wheels scraping the border of gravel and empty air, the Land Rover veered half a foot to the right at the first nudge. The second struck more forcefully. "Fuck it." In an attempt to steady the car, she struggled with the wheel. Despite the limited space, the Bentley flashed its lights once before pulling up next to her. Asha whirled around, and saw his gaze. "Bennett Vale, sir." One hand on the wheel, the other gesturing, no, telling her to stop, cool, expressionless. In the passenger seat next him. "Stroud, Kyle?" He was grinning. The road curved abruptly as she pressed the throttle in an attempt to outrun them. A hairpin bend. Ahead, ice glinted. Then, bam! She was sidewiped by the Bentley. The Land Rover lurched to one side. Tires squealing, teeth clenched, Asha muttered a swear. Her phone was gone as she reached for it. Onto the passenger floor it had flown. She extended her hand. The Bentley blocked her at that point. Sweated a lot. Pushed her up against a low wall of stone. The Bentley door sprang open before she could even throw the handbrake. In a matter of seconds, Kyle had her. He grabbed the edge of her jacket and yanked open the driver's side door. He growled, "Give me the damn drive." "What?" "My dear, the camera card. The person who witnessed too much." He was looking for her. Two quick, rough hands. He ripped open her backpack and rummaged through the equipment. Just behind, with his arms crossed, Bennett watched like a guy above everything, unconcerned, untouchable. Right up till the noise? A high-pitched, shrill whinny, like a war cry, piercing the cold. Kyle stopped. What on earth was that? Louder, another wail. Next, hoofs. Footfalls on frozen gravel. Just in time to see her, Asha twisted in place. Skylark. Suddenly, nostrils flared and eyes went wild as they charged down the hill. No saddle. Not a rope. Without hesitation. Pipit behind her. The foal called out as it galloped clumsily to keep up. It was too late as Kyle turned to face them. Skylark and the Bentley collided. Her front hooves collided with the headlight on the passenger side, breaking it with a glass explosion. Inward, the hood crumpled. The alarm went off. Bennett staggered back, thrashing his arms. Skylark turned and reared as Kyle wheeled to flee. He lost his equilibrium, as her hooves struck him only inches from his skull once more. He fell hard to the ground, bleeding from a cut on his temple and yelling obscenities. Heart pounding, Asha snatched up the backpack and staggered out of the Land Rover. With her legs shaking but firm and her chest heaving, Skylark suddenly stood between her and the males. The road was blocked by her body. Pippet pressed against her flank as he stood behind her. As though he were witnessing a ghost, Bennett gazed at the mare. You're the one," he uttered quietly. His voice wavered. "It was you who ran." Then tires squealed behind him. With its lights flashing, Cerys's patrol car emerged from the next turn. Then came a second squad car. Officers poured out. "Hands in my line of sight." The sound of Cerys's voice was like thunder. Bennett remained still. Kyle let out a moan on the floor. The body cams turned on. Bennett was approached by one of the officers, who brought up a plastic evidence bag. There is a folder within. Records. The Vale Trust crest is stamped on it. Donation invoices, signed, dated, and presented as donations to charities. Bennett had attempted to reclaim the folder. Cerys slowly turned to face him. "You gave me everything I need to stop you just now." He parted his lips. And there was a gentle click. She used a body cam. Recording. Live. Kyle continued to swear beneath his breath as he was placed in handcuffs and loaded into the back of the patrol car 20 minutes later. As two police arrested Bennett for obstruction, attempted assault, and conspiracy under the Charity Fraud and Animal Welfare Acts, Bennett stood silently with his gaze forward. With her arms crossed, Asha watched them drive away while leaning against the side of her truck. Skylark was standing next to her. Still. Be calm. As if she had always been here. "You returned," Asha muttered. The mare turned her head and lightly stroked Asha's arm with her muzzle. Pippet gave a quiet nicker. The wind then arose and whirled about them. Chilly. However, it is no longer dangerous. The sun had fully risen by the time the convoy arrived at the quarry site. Carneddau was also waiting. As the sun broke over the hillside and illuminated the slate-strewn basin with golden light, the convoy rumbled into Quarry 3. The morning had that uncommon, fragile silence, the kind that holds its breath before something breaks, but the frost still clung to the rocks. After exiting the first truck, Asha looked around the area. A natural amphitheater of stone and shadow was formed by the steeply rising quarry walls on all sides. Along the borders were corroded and abandoned pieces of old machinery. But what really got to her was the stillness. Too still. Too silent. Until the sound of a chain jingling. With her heart in her throat and her boots crunching on gravel, she followed the sound around the curve. Behind her were Imogen, clothed in her black wool coat as if she had walked out of a different century, Cerys, Eleri, and two officers in uniform. Together, they moved. Nothing to say. Then they noticed it. Half covered with a weather tarp, a large steel shipping container is stuck between two boulders. The doors were tightly encircled with chains. Inside, there was a bad smell that came from damp decay, sour hay, and something older and more depressing. The signal came from Cerys. Bolt cutters were carried forward by one officer. Clang! The chains came loose. The doors were jerked open by another cop. A ray of brightness pierced the inside darkness, and he moved forward. Carneddau? Enormous. Worn by the weather. A mountain of spirit and muscle. As he aged, his once slick black coat turned a deep, thundering grey. His flanks were scarred. He had coal-like eyes. However, he left with pride. Upright. Complete. Asha was immobile. Her throat constricted. She had previously seen pictures of him, but usually in a distant setting. He was the Carneddau's mythology. For more than 10 years, the stallion had been the leader of untamed herds. Not touched. Not broken. Uncontrolled. So far. He approached them methodically, one step at a time. He stopped as he got to her. With her breath caught in her chest, Eleri moved forward to stand next to Asha. Then Carneddau dropped his head, just a little, silently. Just one nod. An acknowledging gesture. Show respect. Asha took a step forward, and touched his shoulder. His coat was damp and freezing, but underneath it was warm. You waited, she said. You held out? One of the officers yelled behind them. Activity on the ridge? Everyone's heads turned. Kyle. Sprinting. While they were concentrating on the container, he had fallen from the opposite side of the quarry. His coat was covered in mud. He hugged a duffel bag to his chest. Legs slipping, boots skidding on the frost, he scurried across the slate field. Cerys followed him out. Cease. Police, stay put. Kyle didn't stop, though. Reaching the ledge over the southern plunge, he ascended higher. Without a rail or ropes, the ridge grew narrower until it was only 2 feet wide. Just a 30-foot drop and jagged stone. With Carneddau's presence still blazing behind her like a second heartbeat, Asha followed, albeit more slowly. When he got to the top, Kyle turned and slipped. Below him, one leg sprung out. Dispersing papers, USB sticks, and a wad of foreign currency, he dropped the duffel bag down the slope. His eyes were wide with fear as he caught himself on a boulder. Now 10 feet below him, Cerys was steadily ascending with his rifle holstered and his hand outstretched. She called and said, "Kyle, you don't want to do this." His voice broke. "He'll murder me." "No, he won't. He is being held. It's finished. He's not someone you know." "Now he's nothing," Cerys yelled. "The only one still running is you." Asha arrived at the hilltop. She remained silent. She just gazed. Whatever remained of Kyle's confidence fell apart when he looked at her. He stumbled once more while attempting to turn, and Cerys reacted quickly this time. She made a lunge. Took hold of his wrist. It wasn't terror that made him shout. It was anger. Once, twice, before his feet gave out completely, he thrashed. He lowered himself toward the slope. Cerys, however, hung on. Her feet were braced on the stone, her arms strained, and her knuckles were white. Behind her, another cop emerged and extended his hand. They pulled together. Deflated, Kyle fell against the rock, panting. Steel handcuffs clicked into position a moment later. He didn't speak again. News vans were parked at the quarry's edge by mid-morning. Shortly before the operation started, Imogen had accidentally informed a few press contacts. Cameras now rolled as Asha and Eleri accompanied Carneddau as he was carried down from the container, his head held high and unwavering despite his weariness. Sir Bennett Vale was standing in the middle of the scene, escorted by 2 fully uniformed SID agents. He was, of course, spotless. A black coat. Pants that have been pressed. However, he had a pale face. He was off stage for the first time. And he had nothing to say when the microphones were pointed at him. Cerys read out loud the charges. Conspiracy. Infractions of animal welfare. Under the Charities Act, fraud. Obstruction of the legal system. Asha watched the flashbulbs go off from a distance. Bennett winced. Carneddau didn't. It was impossible to overlook the contrast. Asha sat next to Cadda's stall that night while the rescue crews moved the surviving horses into makeshift shelters. He was eating, but slowly and cautiously. He had cleansed a tiny cut on his haunch. He breathed steadily. Leaning against the stall door, she allowed the fatigue to overwhelm her. Then came Skylark. Silently, she moved to the next stall, pushed the gate open with her muzzle, and entered. Cadda pivoted. And they stood for a long time. Not a sound. Don't panic. Only 2 people survived. 2 leaders. Once more, together. Shutting her eyes, Asha allowed it to sink in. It wasn't finished. However, justice had already started. That year, spring arrived late, but it was like forgiveness. At Bryn Derwen, the fields had started to turn green once more. Soft moss and blossoming heather replaced the frost that had previously covered the ground. Skylark's grey coat glistened in the morning sun as she grazed under the oak trees next to the southern pasture. Pipit, whose legs were stronger now and just wobbly with delight, darted next to her. And Cadda watched from the far side of the meadow, past the stone archway that had just been restored by locals. Even if he was thinner and possibly slower than previously, he was still tall, proud, and the person people followed. Behind him, the field was littered with dozens of other ponies. Mares Carneddau? Colts are hardly out of foalhood. All survivors. They had taken over this place. Only a week before, the sign had been erected. Easy. Crafted by hand. Fastened to a sturdy, worn-out wooden frame. Haven for ponies at Bryn Derwen. Below, a tiny inscription charred into the wood. There is promise in this land. And 40 names below that. A few were known. Malik Asha. Vaughan, Cerys. Arundel, Imogen. Others were not as well known. Volunteers. Veterans. Steady hands. Locals who had arrived with heart, hammer, and hay. They had both left something behind. They had both decided to remain. The federal investigation was still in progress. Even with the greatest lawyers money could buy, Sir Bennett Vale was unable to stop the fabricated documents, the eyewitness accounts, or the video. The mound of evidence could no longer be buried, with Cerys's team spearheading the probe and whistleblowers emerging from within the Vale Trust. A public trial would be held for him. And the cameras wouldn't be on your side this time. In contrast, Kyle Stroud had accepted a plea bargain, providing contact information, logistics, and identities in return for a lighter sentence. It would be years before his face was seen again. What was lost was not restored by any of it. However, it made guaranteed that tomorrow would see lesser losses. Asha was standing by the stream that ran along the pasture's edge and curved into the trees below. She had a little braid of black horsehair in her palm, with a hint of grey and a fine crimson thread running through it. The mane of Orion. After the fire, what little was left. Since then, she has kept it close at hand. A token. An injury that had never fully recovered. She squatted down by the stream now, slowly unwound the braid, and let it drop. It floated for a while before sinking. Lost. Not lost, though. Soft hooves came up behind her. Imogen? No ritual. Gently, she inquired. No, Asha replied. Just relief. As she watched the last of the braid be carried away by the current, Imogen folded her arms. I understand how you felt about that loss. I believed I was to blame, Asha muttered. For years. It wasn't. I now understand that. However, it's not always easy when you know. Imogen took a while to respond. Rather, she looked toward the far end of the field, where Pipit had started making awkward loops to chase a butterfly. She remarked, "You gave them a future." Asha faced her. "We handed one to them." "No," Imogen said in a firm voice. "You kept her alive. You went after them. You continued. When everyone else turned away, you listened. You stayed long enough to catch up with the rest of the world." Asha remained silent. She didn't have to. Because Skylark raised her head and gave one loud, clear, and powerful whinny in the pasture below. An unwarranted sound, but of a sense of belonging. The sanctuary has quickly expanded. Volunteers travelled from Ireland to Cardiff and Liverpool. A barn design was supplied by a retired architect. Every weekend, veterinary students were sent by a nearby institution. In honor of a lost foal they had once raised, a feed firm made monthly donations. It was more than just a rescue at the haven. An uprising took place. In opposition to quiet. In opposition to cruelty. In opposition to the notion that nothing could be altered. Everything had here. A local reporter arrived to do a follow-up story a week later. Pipit was now sleeping in the shade of the oak forest where she conducted her interview with Asha. "What does this location represent, in your opinion?" With the camera rolling, the reporter inquired. Asha gave a quiet smile. "There won't be any more shadows. No more mares going missing in the night, closed sheds, or concealed trucks." She turned to face the pasture. "It indicates that the mountain retains its property." Asha took one final stroll over the fields that evening as the sun began to set. The air was warm, with a hint of sea and grass. Skylark waited at the gate. Behind her stood Cadda. Pipit, who was too large to be referred to be a foal but was still bright, ran to catch up last. With a gesture, Asha touched Skylark's forehead. "You took us home," she muttered. The mare remained motionless. But she looked into Asha's eyes. And for a little moment, they seemed to fully comprehend one another. With boots crunching quietly on the path, Asha turned to go. Skylark blew a single, gentle breath behind her. The type that states, "We succeeded."